Well, welcome to the second Gaudino Dialogue. I'm Edward Berger, professor... Oh, really? Wow. All right. Thank you. Okay, they are commenting on my tie. Thank you. All right. From the Department of Mathematics and Statistics, and also the current Gaudino Scholar. Robert Gaudino was a beloved professor of political science here at Williams College from 1955 until his untimely death in 1974. He was known for putting his students in uncomfortable situations and was a great proponent of experimental and experiential education. The Gaudino Fund, started by some of his loyal students, supports the Scholars Projects, and for this year and next year, we'll be focusing on an endeavor that transcends all human activity, the uncomfortable act of being creative. This Gaudino Dialogue series will bring back to campus some of our most interesting and successful alums and have them share with us how they have been creative in their professional lives, as well as confess the uncomfortable but requisite failures they've experienced along the way. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Gaudino Fund and the President's Office. I want to personally thank President Shapiro for his support on this project and also acknowledge the fine work of my colleague, Carrie Green, who worked behind the scenes to make this event a reality. Okay, well, let's get down to the fun business of seeing if we can make our guest uncomfortable. Over the past 4 weeks, the eyes of America and much of the world have been focused on 4 live televised presidential debates. Over 63 million individuals watched these telecasts, and over the intervening weeks, hundreds of millions of people have been talking about them. In fact, they've even created some instant celebrities. Just ask Joe the plumber. The amount of creativity and leadership required to choreograph these complex events that now inform our democracy so fundamentally is seemingly infinite. The person who oversees, organizes, creates, and leads these enormous undertakings is a Williams alum. In fact, one of the first women to graduate from Williams College. Janet Brown graduated from Williams in 1973 and then moved to Washington, D.C., where she worked in the offices of Senator John Danforth and Ambassador Elliot Richardson at the State Department. She also held appointments at the White House, the Office of Management and Budget, and the U.S. Department of Labor. In 1987, the Commission on Presidential Debates was established, and Janet Brown was named the executive director of this nonpartisan, nonprofit corporation. She has held this post ever since, thus making her the only executive director of the Commission on Presidential Debates in the history of humankind. She holds a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University, and in 1993, she received one of the first Williams College bicentennial medals for distinguished achievement. She was also awarded an honorary doctorate of letters from the University of San Diego and was their commencement speaker in 1997. At Williams, she has served on the executive committee of the Society of Alumni and as a member of the Board of Trustees. In her first live appearance since the last presidential debate, please join me in welcoming Executive Director of the Commission on Presidential Debates, Janet Brown. Janet? I got it all out. You did. How are you? Did you like that introduction? Was that good?
That was wonderful.
Just like your mom wrote it.
I learned quite a number of it. Yes, Mommy will be very happy.
Did I get any of that right? Was any of that true?
Some of it, yeah.
I see. Okay, some of it. Okay, well, you'll correct me. So, welcome back to campus. When was the last time you were back?
A couple of years ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And it looks a little different now, right?
Yeah, lots of new buildings, lots of glass, lots of stuff going on.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Gorgeous.
So we invited you here. We have no script. We just want to talk to you about what you've been doing, what you have been doing, and get a sense of how creativity has infused your life. So why don't we start with Williams? So you were here. You graduated in 72. 73.
You got that right.
I see, but I messed it up just now.
Correct.
So that was not so good. And so...
It's just numbers, Ed.
It's just numbers. I was never good with numbers. So... So tell us about that. I mean, early on here, there weren't a lot of women. How many women were around at that time?
Well, we were all exchange students, and some of us thankfully morphed into transfers. I think there were about 50 students in our class of roughly 350. we were a little conspicuous. It was a magical experience because President Sawyer, Jack Sawyer, had thought so carefully about how to co-educate Williams. And it was just an amazing thing. This became our school the minute we set foot on campus. It was a wonderful place to go.
Was it weird to be such a small group of a larger 300-body student?
Yeah, it was, but to be honest, in some ways, I felt sorrier for the guys in our class because they had come to an all-men's school, and the next thing you know, there are women, and there were things that happened that had to happen, and some of them happened in more graceful ways and some in less graceful. We, all of the women in my class lived in Greylock Quad. There was one floor of us in Gladden and one in Hopkins. And I remember one woman in Hopkins was particularly offended that the urinals had not been taken out of the bathrooms in any restroom that might be used by a woman. And the guys in Hopkins, who were not particularly known for their social graces at that time, decided to plant ivy in them so that they became planters instead of, yeah.
But that's a nice thing.
It was creative, it was courteous, and she only thought it was the ruder for it, where the rest of us thought it was fairly entertaining, not to mention a productive step. It was a work in progress. There were, I'll give you a funny example. At the time, as luck would have it, we had the top 1 or 2 women tennis varsity players from Wellesley, Wheaton, Skidmore, Vassar Smith, and Holyoke. And we'd all played each other in the New Englands in our earlier schools. So we decided, well, here we are, and we should go to the New Englands again, which were always held in New Haven. So we got in our cars and we schlepped to New Haven, and there we are, and we register as the Williams team. And we signed ourselves in, and we paid the check. And then I remember the woman saying, "This is great. All you need to do is have the coach come in and sign, and you're good to go." And we said, "Great, yeah, right." And and we disappeared, and one of us changed her hairdo and put on a baseball cap and sunglasses and came back and signed us in.
I see, and that was the coach. Now,
whatever works.
You transferred here in your sophomore year or your junior year?
Junior year. I came as an exchange student and thankfully conned the admission office into letting me stay, as did a lot of the other women in the class.
And where were you coming from? Where did you spend the first
I came
half?
from Wellesley.
Wellesley? And so what were the differences between, obviously besides the gender thing, but it's obvious, but...
I'll give you 3 small examples. Wellesley is a wonderful school. It's a terrific school. It's a very good institution in many, many ways. It wasn't a very good fit for me. But the first example where I had a signal of that was the first meeting of the varsity basketball team where we discussed the term paper. And no, I'm not kidding.
What do you mean the term?
The term paper.
That they all write, the same term paper.
The term paper for the varsity basketball team. I remember thinking, okay, fine. This isn't going very well so far. The second thing was the accessibility of the faculty, which was limited. A lot of them lived in Cambridge, and it was not the sort of interaction that I had hoped for anyway, and that I encountered here. The third one was a very poignant example, and I think I should share this because I think to the extent there are students here, they should know this. My paternal grandmother died the week that I would have taken final exams my freshman year at Wellesley, and that was the year, that was the week, in fact, of the great student strike over Cambodia. And most people had left campus, and most people were not taking exams. But I wanted to because I could get my final grades that way, and I thought that was important. And the short story is that the econ exam, which I thought I wanted to major in, was going to be held on the day of her funeral in Mississippi. And I went in to the dean, having already been told by my econ professor that it was fine to do a makeup exam just for me. She understood the circumstances. She was a legendary economics professor. She said, but you have to have the dean approve it. And I went into the dean's office, and I'd been crying for 24 hours. And the dean heard this and didn't say a word and turned around and took a book off the credenza behind her and opened it up and said, Rule 24, paragraph B2, you'll take it now or you'll take it in the fall.
Wow. And
I said, it's micro. And she said, you heard me. So I missed the funeral. cut to my senior year, first week of my last semester. My other grandmother passed away, and I slipped a note under the door of my senior advisor saying, I have to go home, and I don't know when I'll be back. And I'm sorry I'm missing the first week of classes. He was not only my senior major advisor, he was my senior special project advisor. And when I got back a week later, blitzed, I ran into him in the hall, and he said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I guess I'm doing as well as I can do. And he said, you know, you missed the deadline for honors. And I said, I didn't know when it was. And he said, I filed for you. He said, you don't need to do it if you don't want to, but it's done. That was Fred Rudolph, who's hiding in the back row.
Over there.
That's the difference, in case anybody wants to know, between Williams and a lot of other places. There is huge personal attention here to the individual. There's huge commitment to teaching. The office hours that all of my professors here at Williams kept in a week were more than most professors at Wellesley did in a month. It just was a different approach. And those of us who stayed thrived. It was a huge privilege to be here.
Now, back in the 70s, I mean, the internet wasn't that big then. And so, you know, news wouldn't travel as quickly as it does now. I mean, how does one hear that a place like Williams College, which is on the other side of the state, is going to go co-ed and they're accepting transfer, you know, women to come in and come for a year, a semester, or transfer? I mean, how did you hear about it, and what was the impetus? I mean, besides these stories, to say, I'm going to try this out and see what happens on the west part of the state.
The 12-college exchange was very popular. It was a wonderful program, and I know now a lot of people have the resources and the ability to go for a junior year abroad. But if that was not an option, to be able to go to another school for one academic year and know that you could experience something else. I wanted to major in U.S. Studies at Wellesley. It was very difficult to do. Here there was a department. And I remember thinking, if I could do that for 1 year, this would just be great. I did not know that I would come here and just fall completely in love with the place and the people, and that it would be such a terrific fit. It was just so it was all word of mouth.
And it worked.
And it worked. And we were all very lucky.
You once said, I think, and if I'm wrong, you'll tell me, that one of the greatest moments that you had here at Williams was being the first captain of the field hockey team here. Is that right? So that's true.
That's true.
So tell us about starting something like that, the lessons you learned from starting an organization like that and leading it, and how that kind of informed the kind of things that you're doing now when you started, you know, at the Commission on Presidential Debates, which was a brand new thing. They're probably identical, I would imagine.
There was a little more order to the field hockey team, actually. Same thing. Those of us that had played hockey at other schools got together and beat the poor freshmen into submission and joining us, and conned some of the soccer coaches into letting us have time on the field by a variety of different methods, and that worked. And then did things to draw attention to ourselves that were somewhat shameless, like taking on the men's basketball team, who didn't understand you can only use one side of the stick, and didn't understand any of the fouls or the do's or the don'ts. But to this day, I take joy in remembering the way I hooked Harry Sheehy around his ankles, and he went down like a 6'6" pine. And the men's hockey team got enormous joy out of this. It was a great moment in sports.
All right, so you leave here 2 years later, and you went back to D.C. You started in D.C., right? You're from D.C.
D.C. is my home.
Right, and then you went back to D.C. And then you very quickly kind of finagled all sorts of interesting opportunities for yourself. How did that happen?
I did finagle. That's exactly the right word. I went home and I taught tennis for the fourth summer in a row, and then I coached field hockey, and then I was offered a basketball coaching job, and my father at this point, looking at the value of my BA and looking at the fact that this was not the future he had hoped for his first child, said, "You hate basketball." And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Okay, time to think bigger." And at the time, Elliot Richardson had just been fired by President Nixon from the Justice Department in an episode that now seems a long time ago, but was extremely poignant at the time in what was known as the Saturday Night Massacre. And he went to the Smithsonian, to the Woodrow Wilson Center, to write a book. And I did something that in hindsight is so ridiculous. I wrote him a letter saying, field hockey season is over and I need a job. And
is that what you said for real?
Yes, I did, actually. And I said, and you've left the Justice Department and you're writing a book, and maybe you need a research assistant. And he wrote back a really lovely note saying, please don't call us, and we probably won't call you. And 6 months later, he called.
Huh.
And I got a job working on this book, which was a tutorial in everything to do with domestic policy and some foreign. And that was the launch into public policy, public service, and government. It was an absolutely amazing experience, and it was a life-altering step just for me the way Williams was.
So when you left Williams, you had no vision for what you wanted to do.
I had not only no vision, I actually was so unhelpful, I refused to be the third person that signed up for some recruiter who was coming here that needed to know there were 3 people signed up in order to come.
So you cost 2 other people a great career.
Yes, I did. They were not happy because it was known that I was the third person, and I said, I have no interest in, I don't know why I should do this. And one was somebody that was in my dorm, and she was particularly unhappy, but I had minus vision.
Wow. Do you remember, because I found this, do you remember the name of the book that you were helping Elliot Richardson with? Because it's very interesting given the course.
Oh, it's totally on point.
What is the name of the book?
The name of the book is The Creative Balance.
Exactly. So what was that about? I mean, just give us like a...
Well, this was very interesting. You can imagine a man who had been in 4 cabinet posts and had worked for a president who had been through what President Nixon went through. And he got a contract with Holt Reinhardt, and they were very hopeful it would be at least a memoir, if not a Watergate expose. And absolutely true to what he had told them, he said, no, it's going to be a serious book about public policy. And it was. And it is a very serious book. And in fact, it is so serious, it was remaindered very quickly. It was what Elliot wanted to do, and it was a phenomenal thing to be able to work on.
Was it fun to work on it?
Oh my goodness, it was absolutely extraordinary. This was a man that had held posts in state government here, and then in federal government at the highest level, and he was one of the most amazing legal minds ever, and who would send me off. This was a typical assignment. I know somewhere Thomas Jefferson said the following, and then he would quote it, and I would go, and it was maybe, and he would go, I don't remember. And I remember at some point that by the time the book was done, I actually had read everything that Jefferson had written, trying to find this thing, at which point I went to Martin Diamond, who was a Jefferson scholar, and I said, Professor Diamond, who happened to be in the Woodrow Wilson Center too, I said, I can't find this thing. And he said, well, there's a reason for that. He didn't say it. I said, okay, moving right along. It was great.
So from that point on, did you know that you didn't want to be in the private sector and that you were going to stay in the public sector, or you still weren't sure at that point?
No, but Elliot was kind enough to give me the possibility of working for someone he had worked with, and one thing in a very typical Washington way dovetailed with the next. And so it was something that he had set the stage for, which was hugely generous.
What was the next thing after that, the very next thing?
The circumstances actually were, midway through the book, he was appointed ambassador to England. And so he was there, and I was in Washington. And the tail end of the book, I went for 2 weeks to London so we could finish literally the tiny fine points. And then he went on holiday, as everyone does in England, for 4 weeks to Scotland to fish. And we were climbing up this dreadful, hilly, rocky, heath-covered thing that just it could only come out of a novel. And Elliot was just in his element. He was so happy. And it was raining, and it was drizzly, and it was cold, and it was ridiculous. And he said, okay, I can call one of the following 3 people about your next job. And I was so breathless, I just repeated the last person that he said, because that was all the breath that could come out. And that person happened to be the man who had been his number 2 at what was then HEW, now HHS, who was senior counselor to Vice President Rockefeller.
Wait, so HEW, tell us what the initials
Health,
mean.
Education, and Welfare.
Okay.
Which at the time there was no education department. And it was an enormous, sprawling federal department that Elliott had run. And this man, Jack Veneman, had been his number 2. And he was very close to Vice President Rockefeller. Vice President Rockefeller had been asked by President Ford to run the domestic policy operation in the White House. And this was right before the 1975 State of the Union. They were doing a lot of work on initiatives for President Ford to start the election year with. And as you can imagine, the circumstances were extremely unusual. This was a sitting president who had never been elected. And so this was a very important enterprise, and they had cobbled together a team of people to work on the initiatives and the writing and the crafting of it into a message for his State of the Union. It was amazing. We worked 7 days a week, about, 18, 19 hours a day.
Wow.
It was astonishing.
And then did you stay there after that period, or is that when you started with John Danforth?
No, I stayed there and then went to the State Department with Elliott. President Carter asked him to be the special envoy to the Law of the Sea conference, which is where you learn what the phrase LLGDSs stand for when you are stationed at the United Nations for part of the conference of things like this, which involve all members of the United Nations, and you find yourself negotiating with the you've all heard of the G7, the G9, the G5, et cetera. The LLGDSs, just in case you're wondering, are landlocked and geographically disadvantaged states.
I see.
And since they did not have the same natural ability to access manganese nodules, they had their own caucus. So it was a funny time. That sent me back to graduate school.
Then you went back to
Then I went
Harvard?
to work for Danforth.
So wait, so now, did you know Carter? Did you know Ford? I mean, did you meet these guys, or?
I wasn't the bottom of the food chain. I was a little bit below that.
I see.
But 1976 was an extremely unusual operation because of the nature of Ford's presidency and the election. And he was one of the most generous, gracious people imaginable and would go out of his way to try to make everybody feel included. The one time I actually was in his office was with a small group of people that had been brought in to have a photo opportunity with him for the promotion of some work that the government was doing on a particular disease that particularly affected children. And there was a family with the child and then the people from the association, and 2 of us on staff, one senior, one below the bottom of the food chain. And I remember looking at the president who was going around and welcoming everybody, and you could see the look that he gave me was, do I shake your hand or? And I went, and he went, good, okay.
So you never shook his hand?
I did shake his hand. It was at a later time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It was a great moment that it was sort of like, I don't want to embarrass everybody by not knowing the staff, but boy, if he had known everybody down to my level,
it would have been impressive.
Would have included a lot of people.
I see. Now, then you went with Senator Danforth.
Right.
And what did you do there? Were you a speechwriter?
I was his press secretary and speechwriter, which was interesting because I was not only one of the few people on his staff who was not from Missouri, as we pronounced it in the office, but I was working for the only member of the United States Senate who did not believe in the press and was actually not very interested in talking to them about
So it was
anything.
a very easy job.
It was a very easy job.
Yeah, that's great. That's kind of a perfect job.
What was a little bizarre is when there were things he really cared about, like Cambodian refugee camps, and when Newsweek magazine and 60 Minutes wanted to do a serious look at this. And I remember having a conversation with Jack where he said to both, no. And I said, okay. His rule was only Missouri media. And I was going, okay. And I said, Jack, I got news for you. People in Missouri watch 60 Minutes. And he goes, no, they don't. I said, okay, never mind. He's an extraordinary leader, very thoughtful man, combined law and divinity degrees from Yale, and brought both of them to his job with utmost seriousness. So that was great. That was a lot of fun.
Now, you mentioned Time and Newsweek as magazines. And as you know, in the current political election, a vice presidential candidate was actually asked what newspapers and media she reads, and she tried to answer that as best she could. There was one of the magazines that she didn't mention, which is one that would not come to mind, was the American Airlines magazine. That when you're in the air and you're in the airplane, an American airline, and you take out the magazine and you can read about Cher or something. There's a rumor about you. I want to know if this is true. Do you know what I'm going to ask you or no?
Sort of.
Okay. So here's what I heard. You tell me if this is true or not. But that in some American Airlines magazine article some years ago, it was said that Elliot Richardson, your guy, and Nelson Rockefeller were quoted as saying that you would be the first woman president of the United States. Now, is that true? Is that true or not?
There you go. You know what? I wasn't there.
On the airplane?
No, I wasn't on the airplane either. I was told the same thing.
Oh, so you heard that?
Yes,
You never saw the article.
Oh, I saw the article.
Okay, you saw it. So the article does exist.
You may remember. No, you haven't seen the article.
No, I never saw the article. This is a rumor. See, it says right here, rumor. I wrote here, you see? It says rumor.
Right.
And I want to know if that's true. So
Yeah.
you're telling me that it's true.
Okay.
But I haven't seen the article. I couldn't find. I tried to find
That's
it.
good.
They don't archive the American Airlines magazine. Morty, if you could, the library, if you could. Okay.
That's also good.
So
Yes,
tell me about the article. So
okay,
come on, let's get into this.
this
It's
was
not
an
every
article.
person that said in the American Airlines magazine that this person will be the first, whatever, anything.
That's right.
So
There's a reason airlines are having difficulty now, and it has to do with the quality of the material that they put a long time ago in their magazine. This was, actually, it may or may not surprise everybody here that if you want to have more eyeballs read your magazine than anything else, you will either publish TV Guide or Parade magazine or an airline magazine. And it turns out everybody you know, and a lot of people you don't read these. This was about a book about the first woman president. It was a novel. I helped with it. And the publisher and the author were extremely anxious to promote it in every way that they could, including American Airlines magazine. So, yes, there it was.
So someone wrote a novel
Yes.
about the first woman president of the United States, and then in the hype of it, these guys gave an interview and said, well, it might actually be Janet Brown.
Yeah, they were short of ideas that day.
When was this around? What year
This was 1980. 1980.
And so, what did you think? I mean, that's kind of cool, right? You know, these guys. I mean, you know, Nelson Rockefeller. He's people have heard of him.
People have heard of him. It was very generous of both gentlemen, if in fact they said it. It was an
You never asked them if they said that? You never asked
my
Elliot?
gosh, no.
Elliot Richardson, your friend?
No, I didn't ask Elliot. I was afraid of the answer.
Oh, I see.
It was a fun project. I helped the author. The book did very well. In fact, it was #1 on the bestseller list of the New York Times on July 4, which I thought sort of had a certain symmetry to it.
What was the name of the book? Do you remember?
The name of the book is The Prodigal Daughter.
Oh, I see. Did you ever think about that? Like, after you read that and you said, well, you know, let me think about that for a second.
Hey, Ed, moderate Republican, District of Columbia, think about it.
Sounds good to me.
The
You didn't
political
like it?
base is lacking.
I see. Oh, that's right. You District of Columbia. I see. So
You remember
really
that
don't-
one?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I see. So you wouldn't, it would be like not a home state. In fact, you don't even have a state.
Correct.
Oh, okay, I see. So that could be a problem. All right, okay. So that's kind of cool, though. You have to admit that's kind of cool. Do you still have that article? Could you send me?
do.
Can you
I
send
do.
me a copy of it?
Maybe.
I'd like to see it because I like to see it. I think it's kind of fun. Okay, so by this fluke, you get into the public sector. Okay, so you do all this stuff. You know, they want you to run for president. Talk about now in '87. Some people come together and say we need a commission on presidential debates. Now, the debates, televised debates, of course, we all know have been going on since Nixon and JFK in 1960. And then now in '87, all of a sudden, people think that we need a commission. Where did that come around, and how did that come to be? And then why was your name floated? Was there an article in Eastern Airlines magazine talking about you being the commissioner?
We're dating ourselves now with these
I thought
airline
you'd
names.
appreciate
It's
that.
scary.
Pan Am.
Yeah. Ooh. The Nixon-Kennedy debates broke ground and remain historic forums. But people forget there were no debates from 1960 until 1976, when, again, this unusual set of circumstances pertained to a sitting president who had not been elected. Mr. Ford and his challenger, Mr. Carter, decided they needed the debates. They both wanted the debates. And the League of Women Voters stepped forward and sponsored those debates, as well as 1980 and 1984. The League is a fabulous organization, but they also do other things. They lobby, they take positions on issues, and it is, for the most part, a volunteer-based organization. There was an effort right after 1984 by two formal studies, one done at Georgetown University, one done at Harvard, to study what the best way to sponsor debates was. And it was the consensus of both that an independent organization that had no other agenda whatsoever should be established to make sure that these came about every 4 years and that they were done in a way that educates the public. So the commission was incorporated in 1987. To a large extent, it's a creature of the Federal Election Commission, which has certain requirements about debate sponsors. And I was fortunate to have my name floated as a potential staff person and was interviewed and was offered the job.
What were you doing right before then? Like, what were you doing at that moment when they asked you to
I'd actually
serve
just
as a
come
post?
back from 2 months in Japan on a fellowship.
I see.
And was still jet-lagged and was thinking about changing jobs anyway. I'd been working on ERISA issues that pertain to big pension funds here and how they're managed and invested. And this came out of the blue.
So you didn't see this coming down the pike, like you were reading about it,
no.
the Commission on Presidential Debates going, I think I might be able to have a shot at this?
No.
You were totally
Brand new.
You were caught off guard.
Out of left field. Yeah, totally out of left field. And when I was in the government, there is an act that only those people who are government junkies would recognize the name of, that's called the Hatch Act, that delineates a line between who can participate in political activities, who are in governmental jobs. I had always been what is known as hatched. I had never been in a position in any of my jobs to be allowed to participate in a campaign. I remember to this day, you all will smile about this because he's on television so much. David Gergen's office was on the first floor of the old executive office building, and he was a part of the staff, but also a part of the campaign in terms of briefing books for the president. And from our offices on the second floor, I was the one entrusted with these gigantic notebooks that I could take down to Dave's office, but I couldn't cross the threshold into the office. I had to sort of hand it through.
Physically? You physically couldn't cross?
It was reminiscent of old girls' basketball where you got to the center line, you had to stop and hope that you didn't fall over it. So I hadn't been to a debate. I hadn't participated in a campaign. This was all brand new ground for me.
And so now you've been doing this now since '87. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the work that you personally do at the commission, and talk about it in the context of how you see yourself as being a creative soul.
Well, we have to start with my response when you called me to do this, where you said, this is what I'm doing, and it's about creativity, and I said, I have got the greatest list of names I can give you for all these creative people in Washington. And I'm truly flattered you think that what I do, what the commission does, is creative. That thought would not have occurred to me. What I do and what the commission does is we are the production company that puts on the debates. It takes about 2 years to put them together. We started the security decision process and planning process for these debates in December of 2006. And we select the sites which submit proposals. It's done by a competitive application process.
Is it always academic institutions?
Except we've done 22 debates and all but 3 have been on campuses, which is not something we did consciously, but I remember way back when saying to the board, these are about education, and if we can do them on campuses and give young people a chance to have a hands-on role in this, that would be great. So it evolved. It was not purposeful. It's worked really well. And now I have to say it's certainly tilted in favor of going to campuses if it works. We select the sites. We select the formats, which involves a lot of research on what works and what doesn't work.
Are you selecting the formats before the candidates even exist?
We select everything before the candidates.
So the town hall thing and so forth, that was decided even before we knew who the candidates were?
Everything about format, dates, and sites was announced in November of 2007.
Wow.
So if you waited until you've got formal nominees, you'd be way behind the curve. Now, truth be told, in 1992, one campaign decided to wait until late September to start to talk about this. It was a different year. Mr. Perot had been in the race, then he got out of the race, then he was back in the race. And the short story is that the first week of October, we'd already blown past one of our sites and dates. We were told that the campaigns had reached agreement that they would do 4 debates, which is what we we had suggested, but they wanted them in 8 days. And I remember our executive producer standing in front of my desk listening to this because I was scribbling notes down. I was talking with 2 senior campaign officials on the phone, and he stood there, and first he shook his head, and then he went like this, and then he just turned and left the room in complete disgust. And I said, yes, we will do that. Don't try this at home.
Where was that one held? Do you remember?
They were held at Michigan State, Washington University, Georgia Tech, and the University of Richmond. And there was one every other day.
Wow.
And that's a recipe for a lot of Advil. So you can do it last minute. I don't think you can in the current environment because of security issues as well as production issues.
One debate was like domestic, and then one was like foreign stuff and the economy. That's not decided.
Yes, everything was
decided. That was decided too. Yeah. So you knew.
Now there's some things.
The last debate would be domestic. You knew that.
There's some things that are flexible. Obviously, if the candidates, as they said this time, we had suggested that all the debates be held at a table, the way the last one was. That is something we believe lends to a better conversation, a more relaxed conversation, less stationary, being plugged into your podium. As you saw, the first debate was standing at podiums. Obviously, there is no law that says candidates have to debate. You have no debate without the candidates. If the candidates decide, I am not doing this, then needless to say, you have to find common ground.
Were you worried? Because, of course, there was this crisis going on, and McCain was saying he's going to halt his candidacy for a moment, and he might not have come to the debate. Did you notice? Did you know that? And were you thinking about that? How did that make you feel?
I did notice that, yes.
What did you think about that?
At some point, actually, it's hard to describe the chaos in our office because especially when you're doing the first debate, you're doing 4 debates. You've got things on every single burner. And the phones are not only ringing off the hook because they're ringing off the hook, but you've got certain interest groups that decide they want to slam the system, email, phones, you name it. So it's sort of hard to describe the chaos. And when Senator McCain decided to do that, there were a lot of very senior journalists who were wondering, what does this mean? And at some point, to be honest, the answer to that was to say to my little baby crew in the office, tell them that the answer is I'm on a plane for Memphis. These events have been shown for years to be what the public wants. These are the only time you get to see the leading candidates in the same venue answering the same questions. It's a fairly small amount of time, 3 90-minute sessions. And I think it's important to keep going with the plan. The University of Mississippi had been working for a year and a half on this. This was the second time they bid. This was a remarkable and historic event for that place. And it was poignant in more ways than I can tell you. When we had our first production meeting to focus on the short list of sites in July of 2007, I went around the table to make sure that everybody on the crew had actually been there. There were only 2 that I was unclear about. One happened to be the youngest and one the oldest. And the oldest has held more senior positions in networks than you could shake a stick at. He's just an extraordinary man, and I can't say how lucky we are to have his involvement. And he was taking notes, and I said, hey, Bob, have you been to Oxford? And he didn't even look up. He said, I was there to cover the day that James Meredith enrolled. That it doesn't, you're coming to a coming together of a circle. And the chancellor of Ole Miss is one of just the loveliest academic leaders I've had the privilege of working with, and there are a lot of them. And this just seemed wrong to have this event not happen.
So what was your plan in case Senator McCain wouldn't have come down for it? What was your plan? What were you going to do?
We actually had no plan.
Is that right?
No, I stood with Chancellor Kayat, who's a former Washington Redskin, on the circle outside the venue at 8 o'clock on the morning of the debate. And Chancellor Kayat is a combination of athleticism and intellectualism and Southern courtesy and gentleness. And I said, sir, there is no plan B. And so we both said, let's go. We got a debate to do. And that's what we did.
That's leadership.
Or something.
Now, what about like the moderators and things? Do you pick them 2 years in advance?
No, we pick them during the summer of the debate year for one reason, which is, in our experience, a journalist does not want to go through the whole election year being known because they are covering these. You don't want Ed Berger, anchor of the Acme Hardware News, to be introduced every single time he comes on the air as the moderator of the second debate. So we wait until the summer of the election year.
And how do you pick them?
We look for people that fill 3 requirements. Number one, that they have a lot of experience in live, hard news, television broadcasting, which is totally unlike anything else. Number 2, who followed the campaigns and the candidates, and they're totally familiar with the issues. And number 3, who will understand that their job is to facilitate the conversation, not to be a participant. And candidly, in this day and age, our news people are celebrities. And it is terribly important that at these events, the focus is on the candidates.
So Gwen Ifill almost got into a little teeny bit of trouble because she was working on a book or something and was going to mention the word Obama, and people got upset about that or something. Did you see that coming?
No, we didn't know about it, but that book was a bit misreported. There was some sense that the book was already out. The manuscript has been finished. This is a book on a larger political movement. And candidly, the bigger issue for Gwen was the fact that she broke her ankle 2 days before the debate. Wow. And if you want an example of a place that Williams had exercised leadership in giving me the correct skills, it was when she decided she wanted to walk on crutches onto the stage, which were new to her. This was her first time on sticks. And we recruited 2 members of the football team to be her escorts. And I remember saying to them, gentlemen, you need to get up close and personal here, which I understand is harder with a TV celebrity than with other people. And when Gwen had finished her walkthrough, then I was on her crutches coming out on the stage with these 2 guys going, no, closer. So you just never know what you're going to need when. And crutching my way to the infirmary here with injuries galore, it all comes in handy.
Was it difficult to work with the different campaigns and the candidates' groups?
This time went more smoothly than we've ever had it. There was a determination on the part of the campaigns that this was not going to turn into the debate over debates. That was, I think, smart on their part, but it also meant that we could actually get a lot of work done in a remarkably collegial and substantive way that was just great. It helped on every front.
True or false, the candidates at the last debate wanted to see the glasses that they were going to hold to drink water from and practice holding the glass. Is that true or false?
False.
Really?
Yeah.
I heard that on the news.
Yes, you did. Check your news sources. There's... They're not, debates are debates. They are hard, they are demanding, they are exacting. But in fact, they are about physical elements. And I remember in 2000, there was a reporter for the New York Times who had heard in the media that there were all sorts of games being played with the placement of the cameras so that it would determine certain shots. Now, this is a 7 or 8 camera event, which is a lot of cameras in a fairly small space. And as I pointed out to this guy, who was wonderful and really smart, I said, think about it. This is actually geometry. This is not the flying Wallendas. And you can only do so much in a physical space. You want glasses that are heavy enough so that they will not knock over. You want glasses that actually will have the amount of water that the candidates want. The glass story was one of many that turned into urban myth.
So you heard the story, but it's not true.
Story.
Okay.
You wouldn't believe the things we deal with on a...
Oh, tell us one. Tell us one that you actually dealt with.
Keep going. I'm thinking.
Oh, you're thinking? Okay. All right. So, in fact, let me do a little plug then, and you think about something good. Like, because I was there at the last one, right? And you invited me there, which was very nice. And at one point, I saw like about 30 pizzas being brought in. Was that for them or for your staff?
30 what?
Pizzas, like pizza boxes.
Gosh, I wish I'd known.
You didn't see that?
No.
Oh.
Darn.
Okay, so before we close, you really are you run the thing, but you didn't know about the pizza.
No, I did.
I want to announce the next Gaudino dialogue. It's going to be on Tuesday, November 11th, which will be after the election, actually. So then, did you realize that?
Vote early and often.
That's right. It's going to be, our next dialogue is going to be with Herbert Allen from the class of 62. He's the director of Coca-Cola, and he's in the top 200 richest people in the galaxy. It's going to take place at the main stage of the 62 Center for Theater and Dance because he bought it. You're going to need a ticket for that. It's absolutely free, but you will need a ticket in advance, and you can call the box office to reserve a ticket. That's going to be 8 o'clock on Tuesday, November 11th, so I hope you'll join us for that one. Let me ask you a couple quick questions before we're almost done here. Any regrets, like when you look back on some of the stuff that you've been doing with the commission? Anything you say, gee, I wish I would have done that a little differently?
Oh, my. You learn things you never thought in a million years you would learn. I thought it was hard being in John Hyde's and Bob Scott's courses here and being put on the spot all the time. And the good news is it was hard. At least it seemed hard. It was rigorous. And you learn how to problem solve. And what we do at the commission is solve problems, but there are things that come down the pike that you have to deal with, and sometimes it means that the situation changes and you can't do something you wish you could. But at the end of the day, as long as you have produced an event that is valuable to the public, that's the mission, and that's what we're there to do. And if you can keep the rest of this stuff out of the headlines, then that's good.
You talk about being of value to the public. I don't think a lot of people know, but I know that on your off years, you're actually working with other countries and some fledgling democracies to get debates going in other places. Just say a word about that.
That is one of the most moving things that's happened. It came in over the transom. It never occurred to me in the early 90s. What people here don't understand is that our debates are shown in real time all over the world. And because of the importance of our elections to other countries, people watch them in huge numbers. And they see them as integral to the democratic process. People in other countries, both developed and developing, think it's astonishing that Americans believe they have the right to see free exchange of ideas in a neutral setting with free media, i.e. not state-owned, on a regular basis. They think it's absolutely amazing. They aspire to do it themselves. In many cases, they're dealing with many, many candidates, state-owned media, and most importantly, no expectation on the part of the public that this should happen. So they come to us and they ask for help, and it is one of the most interesting and affirmative things we've done. We try to give the help in whatever way works.
What countries have you? What countries have you?
It's all over the place. What's interesting is it ranges from the UK and Japan to a lot of countries of the former Soviet Union countries, a lot of countries in Africa. It's really great. We've sent teams to Abuja in Nigeria several times. They are absolutely committed to this. We have successfully helped put together a commission on debates in Jamaica. We've worked with a lot of their colleagues in other places, and this is becoming a little network of other debate teams in other countries. It's just great.
That's true leadership.
That's true privilege. That's actually taking what we're given in this country and sharing it in a way that I think is very valuable and very meaningful.
Final thought, tell us some life lesson that you now know that you wish you knew while you were here at Williams.
I actually saw this at Williams. I don't know if I reflected it, but I have certainly learned this from everybody I've been privileged to work for ever since, and it was reflected by all of my professors here. And that was, if you are lucky enough to be in this kind of environment, if you are lucky enough to have the jobs that I have had, and you do not do everything in your power to try to put in a solid piece of work and make sure that it's contributing to some good that is larger than your own little universe, then you ought to hang up your sneakers.
Janet, thank you very much. Janet Brown, everyone. That's great.